Forgive me for not having a catchy slogan to open the show with. Before we went on air, I just learned of Steve's genital warts, and it kind of put a damper on the how I was going to open the show.
They've gotten better, but you know what? I would appreciate next time letting me know that you have these conditions before we have our alone time.
Well, you know you're at the right place when we start talking about genital warts. Welcome, everybody. You're watching NonSequitur. If you didn't already know, if you didn't know and you just stumbled upon this by accident, we apologize in advance. I'm kidding. Tonight's going to be a fantastic discussion. I think we have one of our favorite people here, Jammy. What's going on, Jammy?
Just we live in the American dream.
It's a good thing to
Free
live.
Man.
I like it.
Yeah.
Free man on the land.
Yeah.
Sovereign citizen. Jammy, the ultimate sovereign citizen. That'd be awesome.
Is that a thing? Alternate?
No, the ultimate.
Sounds like that.
Yeah, ultimate.
Yeah.
Alternate sovereign citizen.
Oh,
that's a whole other thing.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So before we jump in, let's go through what we've got coming up for the week real quickly. And you can watch this episode. Actually, we did this at 5 o'clock. It's on Ben's channel, Ben Pie, The Alternate Perspective. It was a good time, so check it out if you haven't already. And we'll shoot to tomorrow, which will be Nate Talks to You. Joined us before, and then first timer, the feminist next door. Her Twitter handle is MRaz, I believe. Huge following on Twitter. But tomorrow's ideology episode will be with these two. They will be discussing is the feminist movement necessary in order to invoke change. Should be a good time. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern. And then on Friday, like I said yesterday, I talked to Niels the day before yesterday, and he stumbled upon a collection of original NASA data tapes. Just reams of it, and photos, videos from it was auctioned off from a gentleman that passed away, and in the basement they found a box containing all of this footage and just all kind of stuff. It's fascinating, and you're going to want to tune in. That's Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. We will have an after show for that one as well, and I think we'll have one for tomorrow too. Steve, what do you think?
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm down for that.
And then on Monday, Dr. Bowen will be back with us from Digital Hammurabi. We'll be going through the Epic of Gilgamesh. That'll be a fun time. That's at 8 p.m. also Eastern. Tuesday, Sai will be back. Not a lot of fans of Sai.
Yeah. Had a few interesting comments on that video.
Yeah, Steve and I have been getting inundated with comments about Sai. Nonetheless, he will be back on Tuesday. Hopefully, we'll have an actual conversation that goes somewhere, but you never know. We're going to keep our fingers crossed. And then on Wednesday, Hugo and Jake from the Bible Reloaded will be with us. We're going to be going through the tale of Jonah and the whale. So that'll be fun. And then the big day on Thursday, Armored Skeptic will be here. We'll be talking transvestigations. Jamie, have you ever heard of transvestigation?
No, what's that about?
That's a group of people that believe that the devil turned all the Hollywood stars transgender. And what they do is they go through each video spanning the star's career from when they started until now, showing proof for why they are transgendered.
Like John Travolta used to look like a woman, now looks like a man, kind of a thing.
Right. Exactly.
That's just. I mean, he looked like he was 10 when he was 20, and now he looks like he's 90 when he's.
True. That's true. That's what Scientology will do to you, though.
But this is a real thing. This is stuff that people.
This is a real thing.
Yeah.
This is a real thing. Armored Skeptic actually did a video on it. His latest video is dives into it a little bit. So that's why we're gonna start out with that topic with him. So that'll be a fun time.
Yeah, it's not just like people in Hollywood like being transgender. It is literally they believe, supposedly, that Satan causes people to be transgender. Like they wake up one day and go, "Oh, you know what? I feel like a woman."
Right. I will say though, the devil has pretty good selection when it comes to who he wants to turn transgender or not. I mean, there's some good actors and actresses in there that he's got a good eye for talent. Absolutely. Keep up the good work, Satan. Okay, Friday. Parallax Nick will be here to talk about the ongoing NASA hunt for Planet 9. Some believe that there is a distant planet out there that has a huge tour around the sun, and that it might be coming back around the other way. We're going to find out how much evidence for that exists and what the chances are that's a possibility. And then finally, that same night, Red's Rhetoric will be back with us to take on the Southern Israelite in a Flat Earth showdown at 10 p.m. Eastern. So Friday, a double header next week. Make sure you join us for that.
You gotta like think, when are these guys going to give up with Reds? I mean, has Reds ever lost a Flat Earth debate? Not that I could conceivably think of a time anybody could lose a Flat Earth debate, but I mean,
Never.
they still, you gotta give them like some kind of props for holding the faith, I guess, right? But I mean,
No, I don't.
at a certain point, you gotta go, dudes, just give it the fuck up. Well, even if you're Poe, it's like, what the hell's the point? Now it doesn't serve any purpose any longer to try to go after Reds. You're never going to win. Flat Earthers, you're never going to win. Matter of fact, you can get, other than G-Man, you will never you'll never win an argument against anybody. Never.
That's true.
Because he's the only one I can think of that can lose a debate on Flat Earth.
And that's what we've got coming up for the week. So
I made the mistake of going on Red's show, and I got sucked right into it where a Flat Earther was running. I went on his show just to tell him some good news, and then I just started getting caught right up into it, just hitting back and forth with the guy. It's amazing how fast you get sucked into it. Yeah.
It's a rabbit hole, and that's what leads to other things. That stems off to the heliocentric, geocentric debate. What are the sun? People that believe that the sun and the moon either spin around the Earth on top of the flat Earth, or that they're just lights in the sky. I mean, there's just all kind of different directions you can go. That last slide, guys, was MythCon. Make sure that you check that out. You can go to their website. The information is on there, and they have a good lineup, so make sure you check them out. We'll be giving out tickets again tomorrow for MythCon, so if you are interested in getting tickets for that, make sure you tune in as well. Okay, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to this sharply dressed man, as ZZ Top would say, with no beard or gloves or glasses, but it's okay. And let him introduce himself, who he is, and then introduce the topic for tonight.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the reason why I don't do the beard is because I believe it's a fad, even though it's been going on for 10 years, and I just refuse to jump in line with that. I know a lot of ladies are disappointed, but I can't wait till we circle back around and everybody likes guys without beards again. But
some men too are
never
disappointed.
No, really what it is
I
desire to be a firefighter, so I need to be able to put that oxygen mask on at any time.
I will buy your calendar.
No, I'm Jammy Sizlo, friend of the show, become a faithful follower, started as a fan, I think it was April or May time period, and just watched the show improve greatly, very quickly. I think when I subbed, you only had one sub, and then
probably I think
you
first.
you guys blew up now, so you're on your way to 15,000. So excited about that.
Coming close.
Yeah. So basically, what got me here today was we were on an after show. I think it was Red's Rhetoric Against Jeranism, and we were talking about First Amendment auditors, and I kind of just was explaining my part of it, and so that led to a couple people asking if I'd come on and talk more about that, about civil rights, civil liberties, and kind of putting some understanding into why it's so confusing. It's confusing in two ways. One is it's confusing when people learn how confusing it is, and two, it's confusing that a lot of people assume it's simplified and that it's not confusing, and then it usually leads to massive amounts of disappointment. I'm sure everybody in the chat knows of somebody who goes to court because they believe they have a civil suit on their hands and they're going to sue somebody and make money or make change. And then they get there, or they consult with their attorney before they even get to court. And the attorney says, no, we can't do that. It's not going to work like that. And a lot of people lose faith in the system. But really what it is I believe personally that our government and, the legal system as a whole is just not educating and not doing a good enough job educating the general citizenry of of these procedures and of these things so that people can have the best expectation going in. And that's the, I would say, the average position. But then there's the extreme position, which is people really run with it. And they say, oh, this is where we're in this system of complete tyranny and it's time to overthrow the government. And they get some cray-cray conclusions, is I think the technical term.
Is that a legal term? Cray-cray?
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna go with that. So some quick housekeeping things I thought I'd bring up. One is I absolutely promise the viewers I am not wearing lipstick. I'm going to prove that right now. Just wiped it off, nothing on my hands. So that should take care of any concerns out there. Two is I just make it a habit not to watch the chat while I'm in here. So no disrespect to anybody out there who might be saying hello to me or anything like that. I purposely didn't log into the YouTube account so that you wouldn't find my name if you did the @ thing. I welcome any comments and suggestions or feedback. Just for my brain will not work that way. If I'm sitting there reading chat while this show's going on, I'll lose my thought all the time. So don't expect that. And then Steve, if you see something, I'd appreciate if you could let me know, or Kyle, if you're watching. And then the other thing I wanted to explain was why I'm the guy who's here. So I've had the privilege to be able to serve as a policy analysis for 6 years with a congressional council there's 4 U.S. representatives who are part of this council. And what we do is we serve those representatives by analyzing constitutional matters. Every person on the team, primarily they're college professors, constitutional scholars, and constitutional lawyers. And I sit on the team and we all dissect what we're going to take on. And the 2 things that have been tasked to me for those 6 years was Second Amendment issues and Fourth Amendment issues. And so anytime there's a bill that comes up, what we do is we look at the probability of it ever passing constitutional scrutiny or it ever causing an injury that would lead to that constitutional scrutiny. What got me here more than anything, I would say, is because when I talk to these professors, scholars, and lawyers about coming on the show, I'm a lot cheaper than they are. They want, $250 to $500 an hour. And I offered Kyle and Steve the deal of just for free. I just come on and talk. So that's why I'm here today. So with that being said, I just like everybody to understand that these subjects we're about to go into today are heavy, 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 deep course material. People pay $80,000 a year for 4 years straight to learn this stuff at a deep level before they even get to specializing in a specific area of the Constitution and proper interpretation. And generally, when I speak on these subjects, I've been lecturing like this for probably 10 years of my life. It's a 60 minutes to 90 minutes, and I go into a room with people who are already well adversed on this. So for me to take a very wide subject of 0 to 100 and try to condense that down into the short amount of time I have with you tonight is going to be difficult. I did my best to prepare. I prepared slides that I'm going to try to stick to the script. However, if we decide to go off course and really dive into something, I wanted to just give advance notice to the viewers that I have 6 years worth of research and write-ups that I've done personally in my C drive of the computer. Or I know you guys are probably yelling at me now because I'm supposed to have more than just one drive on my computer, but I have thousands of pages of documents that I have ready to go. I opened up many of the folders so I could be as organized as possible. So if there is a spontaneous question, you see me hunting around on my PC trying to get to it, I promise you I'm not on Google or Wikipedia. Although I have contributed to Wikipedia numerous times to correct them on things that they gladly accepted. So all that being said, let's dive into it. Boole, if you could give me the first slide, please. What starts this confusion in American history is this word right. Unfortunately, it's used generically because it does have a generic definition. So here's the generic understanding, the basic understanding, what we mean when we say right. And that's that rights are legal, social, or ethical principles of freedom. The rights are the normative rules of what is allowed of people or owed to people, and rights are considered fundamental to any civilization. So many times in the founding documents, you'll see them using this term right over and over and over again. And even to this day, you'll see Supreme Court justices use the term rights as a generic term. But the people in the know, the political science professors, the constitutional lawyers who are, the Solicitor General's office, the people who are orally argumenting in front of the Supreme Court, they all know what they're really talking about. And where it causes confusion is when somebody just takes a plain language reading of opinions or text in the Constitution, and they believe that because it says right, they can also say right. And in many cases, that's more than enough to get you through a Thanksgiving dinner. The problem is when you go to invoke your right in a way where it becomes legal and you become part of that legal system, and this is where people get disappointed quite heavily. One of the best examples I can give you of this is where a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. I'm sure everybody has had a friend, or maybe themselves or a family member or something. I've heard countless times where somebody says, I was arrested the other day, and I'm going to tell my attorney that was an unlawful arrest because they didn't read me my Miranda rights. And that's a common misconception about what Miranda, technically they're warnings, what Mirandizing people when it's obligated to do so and things like that. So that's just one example of just many times somebody's set up for disappointment because this system is inherently confusing and it is nowhere near as simple as a lot of people believe that it ought to be. There's a lot more to it. So let's, Bull, if you give me the next slide. Another reason why this gets confusing isn't just that there's a generic term that is used to apply to many things. It's also that rights themselves have a duality. It's very similar to the duality of visible light. You have, with visible light, it has wave and particle-like properties. But on the extreme sides of the light spectrum, it's either just wavelength or just particle. Well, with rights, we get into this middle ground as well, where they have a property where they can be treated like as a whole. The idea that all of civilization needs rights to be civilized, but you can also dive in deep to individual types of rights and really dissect the living crap out of those. And so I thought this picture would perfectly represent that. The picture, if you look at it just quickly, you see a single structure, but if you follow each one of those rungs and pillars, you realize, wait a minute, this is two separate things. Well, how do I see? So it's one of those optical illusions. So there are different classes of rights. You have civil rights, political rights, claim rights, liberty rights. These are generally the two nails that these are all hung off of are what we would refer to as natural rights, meaning they predate or pre-exist any written document, and then legal rights, which are captured in a document. And these are routinely referred to as inalienable and fundamental rights. So natural rights, anytime you hear the word inalienable, think this is something that I was given at birth just for being a human being. I'm not going to go so far as to say you were endowed by your creator. That's a full philosophical discussion, but it's the idea that you're a living, breathing human being. And in some cases, it doesn't even involve speech. The idea that people who were comatose would have the same rights naturally as they did at birth. But it's the point that you were born and alive, right? And then legal rights, again, this is all the paperwork. And that is what they mean whenever you see the term fundamental. That's a fundamental right. That's a fundamental liberty. What they're saying is that's enumerated somewhere. Somebody took the time to write that down. But again, we can look at this just as a whole and judge how free America is based on how well these rights are balanced and how powerful they are, their potency. Or we could also dive in deep and just say we're only going to talk about inalienable rights, or we're only going to talk about civil rights, et cetera. So hope that paints that picture properly. Next slide, please. So I'm going to use a law that exists in America. And yes, I'm not talking about any other countries because this is the only area where I specialize in. But in America, we have crosswalk laws. We have controlled crossings. They're referred to different things, different places. But the idea that there's crosswalks everywhere that we drive. And crosswalks are probably one of the most misunderstood laws by Americans. It's amazing to me when you see these videos of pedestrians getting run over. I mean, 6,000 times last year, 6,000 times this year up to date, has a pedestrian been collided with a car. There's been some type of accident. And it all comes down to drivers either being distracted or pedestrians or drivers not understanding the law. But then you see the comment section of people going, what an idiot, he should have waited till the car cleared, or, you see all this stuff. So I'm going to use this analogy of crosswalk laws to explain the confusion here. All right. So next slide. Look at this phrase that summarizes the 50 states, right? A right-minded person has the right to walk across the street in a crosswalk as long as they are in the right and account for the stopping distance of the approaching vehicle, right? Long drawn out, confusing sentence to summarize something that should be simple. Next slide. So each one of these rights are defined as something different. Now, obviously, this is an English context, but in some cases, it's going to be legal. So a right-minded person, that's speaking just to the competence, the right to walk, that's the liberty or the action, that they are in the right, that would be the protected class, and the fact that the stopping distance of the approaching vehicle, and then you question it, right? That's the veracity, or, am I going down the right path? So when we're looking at this, when we look at the Constitution, when we look at the Bill of Rights, as they're called, I mean, all this is where it gets confusing, is because we never know, are they specific on the right? Or are they general? Like, why do they keep using this word right? And a lot of it was we didn't have the vocabulary necessary to give our Supreme Court the tools to help Congress and state legislations make better laws. The definitions at the time just weren't adequate, and we'll get into that in a second. So the reality here is people, if you're driving in your car and you come up to a crosswalk and somebody is just standing there next to the crosswalk, you're supposed to yield to that pedestrian and allow them to cross. They don't have to sneak out into traffic to get cars to stop. Now, if there's no crosswalks whatsoever and the person has to cross the cross the road, then they have to yield to traffic. If there is a crosswalk and they're 20 feet away from it, they're in the wrong, because they're doing what's called jaywalking. Which, fun trivia fact, Kyle, do you know where jaywalking comes from? The term jaywalking.
A guy named Jay mistakenly walking across the street.
Yeah, it's actually a derogatory term. So this goes back to when we had cobblestone roads and people walked the streets all the time.
I know,
and then all of a sudden, I'm sorry, Steve. I apologize. I figured you would know. That's why I didn't ask.
Oh, okay. Then I don't have to tell you that, because I could be utterly wrong half the time.
Save yourself on that one, Jamie. Save yourself on that one.
I don't know the city. I don't know if it's like an English thing or I don't know where it entails. But a Jay was somebody who's just freaking stupid. That's it. I mean,
so they titled it. Yeah,
but
so
I don't know the etymology of it.
Yeah. Okay. So they titled it jaywalking so that people would be like, I don't want to be charged with that, being a moron. Like, so it's just kind of funny, the history on that. All right. So we get the point here that we need walking. Yes, definitely. That is what it should be. Or as Christy in the chat would say, I'm hoping she's in the chat, douche nozzle walking. So the next slide, Dave. So now that we understand that the law is confusing, the next question is, should the law be changed? Now you're going, what the heck is Jammy going on and on about with crosswalks for? It's for this reason. We have the law that might be misunderstood, but we also have people going around going, that's not what the law means, because I don't think it should be that way. And I'm going to figure out a way to do confirmation bias to get you the point to believe that the law never was intended to be that way. But what I'm here to show you is what you're going to learn tonight, and hopefully you can learn more than what I can get out. What you're going to learn tonight is when somebody says to you, we're way away from original meaning, we're way away from original intent, and this country is nowhere near what it ought to be or what it's intended to be. That's not the truth at all. And if we would like to get that country to whatever figment of that person's imagination is at how the country should be run, there is a process to change it and get it there. But to assert that it used to be that way and no longer is, when generally the conversation is going down towards, I need so many more freedoms, it's not even funny. That's where I like to put a timeout on that conversation and say, it sounds like you'd like to change how things are, not get them back to how they used to be. And that's what we're going to get to. So should the law be changed? Maybe you agree that a 3,000 or 4,000 pound vehicle always has the right of way over a 150 to 200 pound person. That makes sense to me. I don't understand necessarily why the crosswalk laws are the way they are, especially with distracted driving getting up the way it is, with self-driving cars around the corner. But there we are. So let's go to the next slide. So when we get into this, people say, well, that's how it used to be. And they make an assertion like that. They have to understand that when the framers were putting together the Constitution, they were forward thinking. I have a personal opinion that they didn't foresee technology getting to the place that it actually is as quickly as it did, but they were definitely forward thinking. And where you're going to get a lot of this information, unfortunately, is, like I said, at $80,000 a year schools, or you're going to get them from visits to the Library of Congress. Now, I don't want to make that assertion that some things in the Library of Congress, like David Barton did. If anybody's not familiar with David Barton, he's a guy who did Wall Builders DVD sets, and he writes all these books and speaks all the time on how he spent years in the Library of Congress and read all these quotations that the founding fathers were absolute, fundamental, independent Baptist Christians, and they were hardcore Christians, and that all they wanted to do was promote Christianity in America. And then people started fact checking him. They did trips to the Library of Congress, like I've done numerous times as part of my research, where you go in there and you start reading the actual transcripts of these debates that took place, stuff that wasn't captured in major ratified documents. And you see that, holy cow, these people were nowhere near as Christian as you think they are. And the other thing that's great about this is how forward thinking they were, and how states, while they were states' rights minded, they were also very concerned that was going to go down a bad path. And they wanted to allow some type of protection to exist so that states didn't always have all of the power, in the sense that, we need to allow some kind of afforded correction if it ever becomes necessary. And the other thing I think is great when you go through the Library of Congress transcripts of debates is how much they argued. These people did not agree all the time. They would spend weeks upon weeks just arguing on things because everybody had a different opinion how something should be run, much like the discourse of America today. And while they were, spending a lot of time arguing about things, one of the places of contention was, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit here. Let me get it back. Was
Can I ask a question real quick while you do that?
Oh yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, when you say that, you would have to get an $80,000 a year education to get this, can't you also get the similar education from Google? That would work, wouldn't it?
YouTube University for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. That's actually what I forgot to say. So thank you, Kyle. You brought me back. So
welcome,
the only way to really get access to that level of knowledge and understanding is when it's trickled down through the textbook writing. So if you're taking a civics class or a U.S. history class in high school or college, you're going to learn the proper things, but you're not going to learn it to the depth. So, for example, a lot of the textbooks were rewritten, for example, for the Second Amendment post the Heller decision, to classify that it went from a collective right to a individual right, individual right. It was never a state's right, but it went from a collective group right to a individual right, and now teachers are taught to teach that. Now, if a teacher is going renegade and saying their own opinion and that's not accurate, that's a whole nother issue. I'm not justifying any of that. What I'm getting at though is for the most part, textbooks are the way to get it. What the problem with YouTube is, it gives an equal platform for people who have no education on this, no formal education on this matter, to people who are literally just flooding themselves with confirmation bias. So what I was going to say is, if you'd like, there are 2 higher education learning institutes that are available for you to attend, and that would be the Cato Institute and Prager University, which I equate to Trump University for Business School. So,
Prager. You triggered a bunch of people with that one right there.
Yeah. So not adequate. These are closed-minded circles where it's like, hey, this is like sending your Christian children to Pensacola College, where it's like, hey, if you want to keep your kids in the Baptist mindset, send them here, and we'll make sure they don't lose that while at school. It's that closed-minded, keep them in the circle of learning that they had from their family. So again, I'm all for disagreement. I'm all for people speaking how they think things ought to be, but I'm not for facts. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. So here's where, like I said earlier at the show, this is where the government's doing a disservice. They're not setting the standard right. They're not heading off this curve of confusion and disappointment. It's the same thing with police. I feel bad. Police are not given the training tools necessary to deal with the simple fact that every single citizen wants to use their cell phone camera while they're being stopped. So it's a shock and a surprise, because it should have been led by the agencies in charge to explain, okay, this is what you do in this situation. But instead, these cops are left to make their decisions on their own. And I think that's just a very reactive way of thinking. Citizens deserve better. It should be proactive. So let me finish up this slide real quick. So it's this idea that citizens have incorporation, but governments have indemnification. And the founders, enumerated this out, if you want to, if I can say, in the Declaration of Independence. They made a phrase that said that governments are amongst men, by consent of the governed. That's where they're saying citizens have incorporation. if you think about, if anybody in the chat or anybody who's going to watch this post owns stocks in a corporation, an actual legal corporation, you become a shareholder. Well, America's stock into their citizenry is everybody gets one share. Correction, post-Civil War, slaves got 3/5 of a share. But here we are today in modern times. Everybody gets a share. Every voting eligible adult gets a share. So I don't want to make this my analogy to break apart when you think of how somebody can take control of a corporation because they have more shares than somebody else. But in America, everybody gets one share. Your one share could directly drive the price of that stock down significantly, or even possibly increase it and affect everybody else. But if you go into a shareholders meeting and you go to vote, your one share gives you very minimal power to have any influence whatsoever by your own say or voice. And that is the system that America is. Citizens have incorporation of their power. So that means a single citizen can be injured by something, whether financially or physically, and the government has a responsibility to make that right. But an individual doesn't get all the power. You don't get one single citizen who can walk up to a police agency and say, you're all unconstitutional and I'm shutting you down. Ain't gonna happen. So you have a 1/300 millionth share of power in America when it comes to you flexing your individuality. But when it comes to an injury occurring to you, you get a lot of attention on that and you can affect a lot of change. That would be like selling the share price at half what the value is and pissing everybody off, kind of a situation. You have a lot of influence. So think about it like this.
Jamie?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because what is it when people say, like, for example, I see it a lot of times with the auditors, they'll say, hey, I pay your salary, or worse is I own that building and it's a federal building.
Right. Doesn't exist. That is a figment of their imagination.
It's just a weird concept that they want to have, right?
So it's a misconception in America that a publicly funded building, which is also publicly owned, is now open to the public and ruled by the public. And again, it's about the consensus. It's what the 299,999 people. Yeah. But I'm just trying to make a point there that I've messed up horribly. It's what they think, right? And so you won't get that voice ever. And it goes back to what we're going to talk about in a second here about what was used to start the creation. So I just want to make this point, to start the Constitution. So what I want to make here is the point that you have to understand this. Citizens have incorporation of power. Governments have identification. So let me just finish that up. Governments, it says in the Declaration of Independence that men will suffer evil, right? That governments not be changed for light and transient causes. Men will suffer evil as long as evil is sufferable. So when you hear somebody think of these Armageddon terms, oh, the government needs to be overthrown because, they're making me get a pistol permit. That is just figments of their imagination. You get people who say, I pay your salary, so therefore I'm in charge of you, officer. Well, let me do the math for you on that. Every individual citizen has bought a police officer lunch one time every 2 years. That's what you pay for with your tax dollar. You don't pay their salary as an individual. So it's just very immature. It's a juvenile.
Well, how many lunches have they ever bought me?
Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, no individual person. You get this idea. Well, I'll get to that later. I'm getting way ahead of myself now, but I'll answer that more in depth in a second. So again, citizens' power is by incorporation. If there's an injury. Oh, the analogy I was going to give to explain this: you have a forest. A person who cares for forests, I don't know what that would be, arbor, I don't know. Person comes in to take care of the forest, though, and while instead of feeding and maintaining and beautifying the forest, decides to start abusing an individual tree in the forest. Well, the government might say, whoa, there's potential here for you to harm all the other trees, or that action is harming other trees, not just the one tree, but everybody else. It's now time to step in and do something about that. And this is where an individual power of suit would be appropriate. But to say, I'm a tree in a forest, so therefore I get all the same power as a forest, it's just not how it works. All right, next slide. Let's keep going for sake of time. So let's just talk about the Articles of Confederation. So after writing the Declaration of Independence, the framers said, we need some form of national government to make this all work. They were pro-national government. It's technically a federal government, but they believed at the time that a confederacy is all that you needed. You just needed treaties to make all of the states be good, and everything will be fine. So that's what they did. You know, they made the Articles of Confederation just a giant treaty, and this created a very weak national government. The founders thought that that type of union was perfect. It not perfect in the sense that it was without error, without flaw, but in the sense that it was complete. They didn't need to do any more improvement than that. That they had what they needed to make the recently formed states good. But they had no way to enforce the treaties between the states. They had no way to collect taxes to pay for the debt that they were rapidly incurring. They had no way to raise an army or provide justice, i.e. there was no national court to hold lower courts accountable. So basically just 10 simple years later, and they said, time to start over. So in hindsight, they realized this was a bad idea. Confederacy does not work. To make a strong Republican form of government, we need a federacy. And that's what leads us in going towards a more perfect union. Next slide. So we're heading towards a more perfect union. That's verbiage directly from the preamble of the Constitution. How do we make this better, right? So coming out of the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, this is where basically Ohio and Michigan and stuff was all, what is now Ohio and Michigan, was all purchased by the national government through, states voluntarily donating to pay for it. That they realized they were in massive debt because they were having trouble collecting those IOUs that the states, that the national government had against the states. They were relying extremely heavily on tariffs, so it was impossible for them to have foreign affairs and foreign relations. The states just trying to conquer these territories, the states had completely depleted their militias, leaving their own home defenses completely open to attack at any time. And states were not willing to follow the new anti-slave laws of these new territories that the Confederacy was creating, the national government was starting. Yes, the national government was anti-slavery. The states were pro-slavery for a lot of times, even though they might have philosophically been against it. It's really hard to be economic when your neighbor has free labor and you don't, right? So, right, wrong, or indifferent, everyone can make their own individual choice. I'm not justifying slavery by any means, shape, or form, but it's the idea that there were states that were against slavery, but how the heck are we going to compete? We got to keep slaves just so we can. And yes, it was an economic situation, but when they finally tried to enforce anti-slavery laws in these states resisted and didn't want anything to do with it. And they said, well, the territories are anti-slavery. How can we, what can we do here? We're in a bad shape. So next slide. The federalism was able to provide something the Confederacy did not. And that was a stronger national government, equal sovereignty amongst the states, and better delegation of powers to the states, as well as they were able to, let's be honest, get their money. They needed the states to show them the money, and now they could finally get that. They needed to correct the debt. Why we're still in debt today is a whole nother subject. But they were on their way at the time to recovering that. All right. So next slide. Let's get to the building blocks. And this is, Steve, what you were talking about earlier. This will kind of cover that. So the building blocks of how you can make the civilization even freer and greater and more powerful, and really promote the pursuit of happiness. The idea that people have an innate desire to want to do better. So let's look at the frameworks. Next slide. So most people are aware that the framers used the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights in construction of America, but few know that they also relied heavily on parliamentary procedure. This is, I participate in a lot of caucuses, and one of the things that's really funny is when I'm there and I see people stand up and interrupt the chairman and go, hey, this is not right. We need to make change. Or they go to a school board meeting and they just think that they have a right to be able to, I use the word right, they have a liberty to be able to speak, to the school board, just say their piece, and therefore they must be listened to. And we were built on this idea that we got from England of parliamentary procedure. There are rules of order, and things need to be done by motion and by proper methods, proper documentation, whether that be a resolution or a directive or anything like that. They also were heavily influenced by philosophical writings of like Francis Hutcheson, John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, and Hegel's German Enlightenment, which really spoke to the idea that it's about social contracts. This is the key to having civilization. Social contracts will piss off libertarians and sovereign citizens. A little side note here. My affiliation with as a policy analyst, I was asked by a 501c4 corporation. That's a social welfare group that specializes in Second and Fourth Amendment issues. Because of my background with that, asked me to chair their organization. And I opened that up to the public, even though it was technically private. I wanted to welcome the community. And all of a sudden I started getting a lot of libertarians and sovereign citizens coming in who would wait till after the meetings would conclude or adjourn. And they would come up to the podium where I was at and go, I got a problem with everything that you said. And I would sometimes find myself staying 1 or 2 hours after trying to explain, you have it wrong, buddy. I don't know what to tell you. But I blame the Koch brothers for that with their Tea Party. Did either one of you two get into the Tea Party, just out of curiosity?
No. I'm as liberal as you can get.
I tend a little bit to libertarianism, a little bit, obviously, but I was never subscribed to the Tea Party. But let me ask you quick: the Hegelian dialectics, didn't that imply a type of dialectic that tried to get them, whoever was doing the talking, to subscribe to the state and the wills of the state, and to kind of get into Marxism or whatever? I don't remember the exact. Was it Marxism?
No, not Marxism.
What was it? Whatever the state he was trying to get the person to agree with that type of dialectric form.
I'm lost on what you're referring to. What did you say?
You were talking about Hegel, weren't you?
Yes. Earlier. Yeah.
Okay, so the Hegelian dialectic. Are you familiar with that?
A little bit. I didn't study out Hegel. I did it more of the idea that how they were influenced in the sense of getting to the point of social contract. The idea that if you had somebody in the society who's stronger than somebody else, that they would have more access to rights, and that's what you're trying to avoid. That you need a governmental system in place to level all that out.
Gotcha.
It's kind of where I was going. But if you have something you want to ask, go ahead, Steve.
Well, I just thought, I remember from Hegel that the way he was trying to do this stuff was to get everybody to kind of agree with the state. That was the whole purpose of the dialectic.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Okay, yeah. And this is why a professor I know who I wanted to come on, because he goes down that path that you're going. Unfortunately, I'm going to be a little lax there. I wanted it more as a talking point. Just explain there's more to this than just the simple Magna Carta and English Bill of Rights.
Jamie, when you're talking about the Tea Party, as long as it contains Ted Cruz and Michelle Bachmann, I can't have any part in it.
Well, what I was going to say about the Tea Party is I get it. I'll tell you something personal about me. I'm a big believer in independent, strong women. I support that 100%. So it's frustrating for me when I go on dates with women who aren't like that. Somebody who's has the mentality that I'm a woman, therefore the man should take care of me. They should provide my security. They should provide my finances. They should provide everything. I shouldn't have to worry. I'm basically, I have a vagina, therefore worship me. And so I just disagree with that. I'm all about the equality aspect. And when I got caught up into this men going their own way, I got the memes that went around on Facebook and stuff like that. I go, this is something I could get into. And then I started diving into it, and I go, holy crap, this is approaching incel territory. I need to get out of this.
It really is, yes.
Not anywhere at all what I thought it was going to be, right? Yeah, so it's the same thing with the Tea
You're
Party.
about empowering women, Jamie. You're liberal. Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, it's just it's not even my position is come on, it's 2018, people. Let's go. I mean, there's no reason why men and women cannot be equal. I mean, it's ridiculous that there's anything holding that back. I mean, how could we be so self-destroying? But the point though is so I said when I got involved with the Tea Party a little bit, I was like, hey, this is resonating with me. I like the idea of having some more freedoms. I like the idea that I can tell a police officer, I don't need to be here all day. Let me go. I like that idea. And then I started diving into it more and more, and I realized, wow, this is hardcore libertarian ideals all over. I mean, this is deep. And then I found out it was funded by the Koch brothers, and they're all about throwing off, they want pure state rights and basically get rid of the federal government completely. And
they want to abolish the federal government, do they not?
Yeah,
I mean, they want all of the state level.
It's deep. So, but anyway, so social contracts is the key here. It's the idea that individual citizens go, you know what? Or it's the idea that individual citizens are obligated to let go of this idea of complete and utter individual freedom for the sake of having power, for themselves, so that the government is allowed to come in and take care of everyone else. That is the true definition of a Republican form of government. I tell people all the time, I don't side with the Republican Party. I side with the Republican form of government. It's the only way a true Republican form of government can you have all the needs of everyone met, because it's going to take people who are supposed to be highly educated. We're getting a lot of people in office who aren't highly educated. That's something that needs to be fixed, but it's the best way to get in there. Now, I know people are probably, I'm going to guess that there's people in the chat or watching this not chatting or commenting, saying and thinking to their heads, oh, here's Jammy again. He's all about the government being the most perfect thing in the world. I am not at all advocating that there's not need for change. I'm not advocating that it's perfect. It is corrupt in many areas. But again, this is those light and transient things. My level of where I feel like it's tyrannical is a little bit different than some people's. But the reality is the founding fathers, they were all about social contracts, stare decisis. They wanted common law. That's not what common sense tells you it should be. Common law is what have the courts had to say about it. And they feared the tyranny of majorities. So they did tyranny of majorities. I'm going to say that again for effect. The tyranny of majorities, the idea that a truly, completely democratic society would eventually lead to oligarchy, and they were trying to prevent that. So they wanted this idea that the government's got to have a major stake in this to make it work. They believe that the best balance could be made with taxes being an obligation. Nothing annoys me more than when somebody says, I pay all these taxes and what do I get for it? You can get zero for it. What matters is that you're obligated to pay your taxes. And it's the flip of taxation without representation. Well, you also don't get representation without taxation. And a government that relies on delegation of authority rather than authoritarianism. So delegation of authority. Let's talk about that next slide. I'm trying to catch up on time here as fast as I can. So we have the U.S. Constitution now, and what we have to understand is it's all about delegating authority. So I want you to think about, while you're reading this slide, keep this analogy in your head. For those of you who have children, think of a family who has maybe a 16-year-old, a 12-year-old, 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And the mom and dad or whatever wants to go out for dinner that night or have a date or whatever, and they say, 16-year-old, you're in charge. And the 16-year-old says, oh, okay. So the 16-year-old looks at the 12-year-old and says, I need you to put the 4-year-old to bed while me and the 10-year-old go and do some dishes. And while the 12 and 10-year-old are doing, or excuse me, the 16-year-old and 10-year-old are doing the dishes, and the 12-year-old's off putting the 4-year-old to bed, the 6-year-old tells the 10-year-old, oh, also real quick, can you go and clean up the toys? They forgot to do that. And the 10-year-old says, sure, no problem. I can go do that. And while they go in there, they realize that the 4-year-old left a specific toy that they're going to need for the bed. So the 10-year-old goes in to give the 4-year-old the toy, and they see the 12-year-old arguing with the 4-year-old. And the 4-year-old's going, "You're not mom and dad. You can't tell me what to do," and stuff. And imagine if the 10-year-old who just entered the room goes, "But you promised mom and dad that you would do this. We promised mom and dad we would do what they wish. You have to do this." And the 4-year-old keeps, fighting on it. This is the point. This is why I absolutely personally cannot stand it when somebody says, these police officers swore an oath to the U.S. Constitution and now they're upholding a law that's unconstitutional. They're absolutely, when they swear an oath to the U.S. Constitution, because of delegation of authority, they, by extension, are also sworn to uphold everything the Constitution authorized. If and only up to the point that the Supreme Court rules it's unconstitutional, or even a lower district court or a court of appeals rules it's unconstitutional, only then is it unconstitutional. The court will not, by a matter of jurisprudence, hear cases that are based on hypothetical remedies or injuries. They won't hear it at all. And the injury actually has to occur. So you can have all the opinion, you can have all the discourse you want, but to try to make war against some local police departments, and yes, there are these extreme examples out there, and try to say that it's tyranny because you just happen to believe that that law is unconstitutional, you have no authority to make that basis whatsoever. You have to understand that an oath to the Constitution, by extension, because of delegation of authority, trickles down through. So we have authorizing federal and state legislation, which has further authorizing statutes, which makes departments and commissions and agencies, which make regulations. The Federal Aviation Administration was authorized through codes for them to write CFRs, which they refer to as federal aviation regulations. Well, guess what? You can be fined. You can have civil matters, and in some cases, criminal charges brought against you for not following those regulations. For somebody to say, well, that's not written in the Constitution, so I have to follow it. Again, it's just juvenile and unnecessary. Next slide, please. All of that, though, is under this label, stare decisis, which is Latin for to stand by things decided. Common law. The founding fathers wanted to give this provision, and this was found in the original jurisdiction and appellate jurisdiction provisions of the Constitution when they did Article 3, to allow the courts to make decisions on proper interpretation and carry that out so that everyone else could be on the same page. So when courts cite to that, this is when an issue has been previously brought to the court and a ruling already issued. Many times, where was I going with this? Oh, my next slide. That's what it is. Bull, if you could help me with the next slide. Is we get to a thing where, okay, there's original jurisdiction and there's appellate jurisdiction, but all of a sudden they had a problem where they weren't able to intercede on legislation. So the court had to wait out a really, really, really long time for there finally to be an injury in the sense of go all the way through and have it appealed up to the Supreme Court. And now what they're able to do is when an injury has happened by just the law being passed immediately, the Supreme Court is now given the ability to reach down and pull out that law and intercept and the legislative process and actually issue injunctions, restraining orders on our legislatures and say, no, you're going to amend that law. It's not going to work because we saw the injury occurring the second that you pass that law. Not necessarily hypothetical, but not necessarily all the way through the routes of recovery. So judicial review is a new thing that came out in 1803, Marbury versus Madison. Fascinating story, Kyle. If you like conspiracy at all, this is a really cool thing that's happened in our U.S. history that involved a lame duck session of Congress and Thomas Jefferson pulling some fast punches when he came in late to office against Adams. Wonderful little history on Marbury versus Madison. Encourage you all to go look that up. But anyways, right on the heels of the Alien and Sedition Acts, which is the federal government's attempt at preventing basically an overthrow. They were scared to death that everyone was going to interpret what was going on in France at the time as being something that was going to happen to America. So they tried to head it off by passing all these legislative acts, these Alien and then these Sedition Acts, to basically limit what people were able to say against the government and things as a way to curb it. And Marbury, who felt like he was outcasted as coming to the Supreme Court, took it to suit, and it went to suit. And what they found out was, while the U.S. Constitution does not explicitly define a power of judicial review, the authority for judicial review in the United States has been inferred from the structure, provisions, and history of the Constitution. The procedure provides for different levels of scrutiny the court will apply when stepping in. So basically, under common law, which is what the United States are, judges are seen as sources of law. They're capable of creating new legal principles and also capable of rejecting legal principles that are no longer valid. Contrary in the civil law tradition, which America is not, judges are seen as those who apply the law with no power to create or destroy legal principles. Libertarians love civil law tradition, and then you'll hear a lot of times people will say, what about judicial activism? And while I totally can understand that you might have a disagreement with that sentiment, the reality is we live in a country that's not, quote unquote, that free. The reality is we live in a country where, unfortunately, when the Supreme Court says that that's how it is, until it's overturned, that's how it is. We need to accept it. I don't want to I feel like I'm taking up a ton of time here. I want to make this note. I'm just going to get a little personal again. My connections with local county Supreme Court justices and federal, district attorneys and sheriffs and things like that. They offered me an opportunity to go to a local jail and teach a life studies class. And so I did that for about 2 years. And I would talk to incarcerated people in a jail, about things. And I used to tell them all the time, I said, a person who chooses to be free. Before I even get there, let me give you another analogy. For anybody know somebody, or maybe you have it yourself, a chain link fence so that your dog can run free in the backyard. Every time I go up to these chain link fences, I always see a dirt path right around the perimeter of the chain link fence. I never see, and you always see the dog running the absolute extreme perimeter of the chain link fence. It's like they never just play around in all that open area that they're given. It's like they just keep going around the outsides. And I always use that story to help the people in the jail to see that that's a dog who sees the outside, sees what it could be, and that's all they desire. What they want, what they can't, what they don't have, not what they don't want, what they do have. And I'm not making that as a carte blanche thing where we can just willfully go in and just shackle me. I'll gladly take tyranny. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we live in a pretty darn free country. So if an individual says, I want as much freedom of America as I can possibly get, you will end up in bonds. But if a person has self-bond, Kyle, I don't mean that sexually when I say self-bondage, but when a person says, I'm going to willfully bond myself, you will live free. And so if I was that dog, if I was in that fenced-in area, I would respect and appreciate that my backyard is a lot bigger than some of my neighbors. And I would just appreciate the fact that I've got little, obstacle courses and stuff that my owner put together, if you will. Maybe this analogy is falling apart quickly, but you get my point, is that we're better than we can have self-control, and that will give us a free life. I say all the time to libertarians and sovereign citizens, hey, how much freedom are you tangibly getting after inconveniencing your life that much? What are you gaining over me when I'm experiencing the same things you are? The only difference is, I guess, on principle, you could call me a bootlicker or a sheep. Come on. So anyways, next slide. And modes of interpretation. So a lot of, I'm going to pick on libertarians and sovereign citizens. I apologize. Not really. Sorry, not sorry. They love plain language interpretation. They believe that all they need to possess is a copy of the U.S. Constitution, and they're good. If they can understand the English, they're good. What's funny about that is a lot of their YouTube videos, and I watch as many as I can, they will get into, well, this word's capitalized and that word's not capitalized, which I reply, check out the 11th Amendment. It throws away your capitalization theory completely. But anyways, this idea of textualism, that all you need is the plain language. That's just not the only thing that's going to help you. It's important, but it's not the only thing. Some people will go so far as to say they understand original meaning. I usually ask them, have you ever made a single trip to the Library of Congress? No, but original meaning is a thing, again, you got to deeply dive into. I have thousands and thousands of pages of research on original meaning. Judicial precedent. What has the court said before? Again, a lot of people will take the plain language interpretation of the opinion and believe that they understand it, when a lot of times they're legal terms that are really hard to understand unless you've been in the system, in the know. But then there's all these other modes of interpretation that never get exercised by the average citizen, but the courts are using them continually. Another fun fact, Supreme Court justices don't actually write their own opinions. It's a lot of times it's just quickly dictated to a staff of people, and then they run with it and refine it and make it better. Our justices have staff. They have numerous people that sit and construct and author and make sure that it's proper. But a lot of it, the actual head guy, it's kind of like Trump walking into an office, or any president for that matter, is walking into office and going, this is something we got to get done. This is my quick opinion. You get the general idea. Okay, now it's your task to go and do it. So even though it'll say written by, they're not actually penning it. So what the research staff will do for them is look up this stuff like how pragmatic is the interpretation of the law, or the law when it was written, the moral reasoning behind the law, the national identity, the structuralism, the historical practices. I got to cut the time I was going to go into these in depth, but I'm trying to be respectful of the show. So if anybody has anything more on that, I definitely can maybe talk in private. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Next slide, Bull. Let's talk about quickly just making change to the U.S. Constitution. See what I did there? We're going to make change. What do we do? Founding fathers said, hey, there could come a time when we need to adapt this thing to what society's dealing with at the moment. We got to allow an amendment process, an amendment power. How do we do that? Next slide. Through ratification, Article 5. The Constitution can be amended anytime Congress has 2/3 of both houses in favor and 3/4 of all states in agreement. All right?
Bull, you're ahead by a slide.
Are you kidding me? Damn it.
Next slide, Jammy. You did say that.
You've been ahead by a slide for about 4 slides, and I've been like, how do I stop this? Surprise, everyone.
Dear God. Okay. Shit. All right. I see. This is why I clicked off the show, so I couldn't watch. So we'll just pretend that didn't happen. All right. So anyways, I was going to say, next slide, Mr. Atheist, what the hell are you doing here?
Why? Hey, look who showed up. Wow.
And I was going to say, I heard that you're correcting libertarians, and I just wanted to spend time with you before they take a hit out on your head.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. So how are you doing?
Delightful. How are you?
Am I doing all right? I should ask you how I'm doing.
It's been extremely educational. I've learned a ton.
All right.
Love it.
So libertarian. I've been saying libertarian sovereign citizens numerous times.
Yeah.
So little fun fact here. Did you know, Mr. Atheist, that one of the most quoted founding fathers of all time for proving that individuals have all this power in America is James Madison, who, got to give the guy credit, was behind a lot of the inception of the documents that framed America. Not taking anything away from that. Next slide, Bull. This should be the James Madison slide, to be clear. Did you know that he actually was a libertarian? Now, they didn't have a libertarian party at the time, but if they did, he would have joined it. What's interesting about James Madison is, and this is my point, how America isn't as libertarian as libertarians believe. He introduced of his own volition, and he was not delegated. Literally, they gave him, because he had clout with all the stuff that he had done to help America become founded. He walked in the House of Representatives. Matter of fact, it was on July 21st, 1989, or 1789. Wow. Walked into the House of Representatives and said, hey, I'm really concerned. You'll hear this from libertarians a lot. The federal government that we just created is going to kick everybody's ass. We have got to get back these reassurance to these people that they have individual power. Here's what I suggest that we do. And just started listing all this really well cleared out language that people have significant power and they have all this liberty to take over, to exercise against the government and be equally sovereign as the states are sovereign. And the House of Representatives went, thanks, we got it from here. We appreciate the idea, but we got it. Then they spent 10 days literally cutting away and destroying everything that he said and breaking it down into something that was significantly more supportive of a federal government. And then they passed that on to the Senate, who then further chopped it up. And then they finally said, okay, we have the 12 articles now. We're ready to submit these to the states. And at that time, this is where the Federalist Papers came in, where Hamilton and Jefferson and drawing a blank right now in my head. Holy cow. But anyways, the Federalist Papers went on to try to convince the states to ratify these new 12 articles. And this is what, for the most part, has become to be known as our Bill of, confusingly titled, Rights. But in reality, they were liberties. So this is important because when a libertarian says things like, but James Madison has the original meaning of what the First Amendment exactly is describing. No, he had what he wanted it to be. And the federal government said, no, we're not going to accept that. So a lot of times these amendments the plain language meaning doesn't necessarily mean exactly what you believe it ought to mean. Like I said, if you're learning it from textbooks, you're probably on a good course. If you're getting it from nothing but YouTube videos, you're probably not. Next slide. Hi, Mr. Atheist.
Hey, man. I just wanted to know how long. Oh, are you surprised to see me here? I just wanted to know, how long have you been a globalist lizard person?
So it started when my parents branded me. I still have it
you
somewhere.
You can see his eyes, right? His eyes,
yeah.
The inner eyelid. I've seen it a couple times. So
what was possibly going to be a really good moment here.
Origin story.
Where's your brand at, Jammy?
It's on my ass. I was gonna show you the cheek, but
go ahead. Proceed.
Isn't it always?
I didn't want to demonetize you.
Oh, we don't care about that. It's worth it.
Yeah. Well,
it was demonetized.
It's clearly
in what reality can't you talk about an ass anymore? I mean, seriously, we're gonna get demonetized for saying the word ass. What reality are we living in, people? Freedom.
I'm literally Mr. Atheist. I got to get your opinion on this. I feel like this took way longer than I thought it was going to take.
You know that nobody loves you more than me, but at about 40 minutes in, I was like, I don't know if they're going to get to me. But I feel
bad about that. I really do. No,
it's been a lot of fun.
Go ahead. All right. So I'm glad that you took the time to just throw yourself into my presentation.
Absolutely. You and I have talked about this a lot because it's so fascinating to me that people think by personal declaration they can just essentially completely ignore any federal government, and then they're very selective with what state governments. And you were talking about, there's nothing more fun than watching a sovereign citizen who's about to get tasered yell at public servants things like, "I'm giving you a lawful order. Don't you tase me. Lawful order. Don't you." Ah! That's my favorite.
It's enjoyable. I know, it really is. I mean, my favorite is the one where the guy was outside just dogging on these two guys that are standing outside of a, look like either a courtroom or a lobby of some kind. And they're like, "You can't bring this in here. You can't bring this in here." And he's just being a belligerent asshole. And the guy just literally just took one step back, pulled out his taser and said, "Please step back." Pop. That was it. It was done.
It was
I've seen that one.
No joinder.
Have you seen the natural man? I think he always calls himself. He's got this voice and this beard, and he looks like he's covered in bird shit all the time. And he just he won't let the judge talk to him, but also won't let himself be interrupted. And there's one video where he like leaves the courtroom because the judge excuses herself for a moment, and he's like, "That judge has declared this court over, Mr." Like, he's so much fun.
He was challenging
I am a natural man
of the court. He was challenging the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
That they had jurisdiction.
I think he referred to his name at one point as like a residence he holds from time to time. Like, it's crazy.
So what's really funny about that too is like his trigger word is the word understand. If you say, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" "I don't understand anything because that means I'm standing underneath your authority." You know, like, just stop it. You don't understand anything. No, but
he also likes to attack them for being like pirates or something, that or British revolutionaries because their oath somehow comes from the crown. And therefore they have no jurisdiction. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Maritime law. Yeah, right.
Take well, I mean, to the sea.
You know, if we would
it's
just
remove frills, it's maritime.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, if you just remove the yellow fringes off the flag, you know, you're. But so,
I do got a legit question from your presentation. If you're summing it up, okay. So you were talking about. Oh, you want go ahead and sum up, and then I'll ask the.
No, I'm not even done. I'm like halfway through, so I got to figure out how to keep the time quickly here.
You're more than halfway.
I'm in no rush.
Yeah, okay,
I got to be nowhere.
Well, I feel bad for anybody watching who might have to go to work at a different time zone or something like that. But
we'll be okay.
So
they'll live.
So let me just explain quickly why the federal government is absolutely in the power that they're supposed to be today. So, and again, this all comes down to there needs to be a compelling interest for the government to get involved, right? And what's leading that front is the increase in technology as things are becoming faster and even more dangerous, and just more potent, right? You know, the average human being, we haven't changed that much. You know, people say, well, we're getting smarter. No, our technology is getting better by individual, what's the word, participation. But on a whole, as a society, we're just as equipped as they were in 1770. So what's the idea? You know, we're driving cars that are significantly faster and more powerful than what they had when they had horse and buggy. I mean, but we're the same brain, right? So as we adapt, the government has to adapt. So, Boo, you should be on a slide that says delegated concurrent reserve powers.
I was going to ask a question before. Bull, you don't have to bring me back. You can leave it on the slide. Is a lot of, because you brought up cars specifically, is a lot of that tech that is driving the need for more federal oversight? Basically, what I always think about, like, when all you have is a horse and buggy back in the 1700s, if they even had buggies, I don't know. But when all you had, like, your localized clusters of people are the only people these people ever see, so localized governments make more sense. But now that travel tech specifically, I can go visit my parents in another state and be home the same night. I live in a city with an international airport. Is that what would you say is a big driving force in that need to federalize, because the country is not literally but figuratively smaller now?
Right. The federal government has two major forms of jurisdiction, and that is geographic jurisdiction, and then they have subject matter jurisdiction. And because of the ability to get around so quickly, be careful on what I said there, to get around so quickly, there is they're like, holy crap, our geographic jurisdiction is catching up to us very, rapidly. And therefore their subject matter. So they're in charge of airports, right? That's federal property. It's federal territory, if you will, direct jurisdiction by the federal government because of the interstate capability, right? It's rapid. So yeah, like you said, you walk up to a group of people who are showing not civil protest, but incompliance or insubordination, proper insubordination in the sense that the government has a right to get involved. If it's 30 farmers that are sitting around and they go, get away from the law, run to freedom, where are they going to go? But today, when you got people building rocket ships like, Mad Mike Hughes, and he can go to 1,800 feet in a second. He's a great guy.
Nice guy. We love Mike.
I love his personality. I just wish he was a little bit better educated on this libertarian side.
Oh, he's crazy. He's batshit crazy.
Oh,
Just so you know, you're disrespecting the future governor of California.
This is true, and he could fuck us if he gets to be a governor. I mean, he can just
I'm gonna be
wipe us out of existence.
Yeah. So just quickly, again, this is from the inception of the Constitution I should say from the Bill of confusingly titled Rights, when they had the 10th Amendment in there. The idea that we need to, and even the states' relations article of the Constitution, the fourth article, where it's the idea that we need to provide reserve powers to the states. We need to allow states to have sovereignty, and do things. So here's the list on the left is what the federal government basically is in charge of. The list on the right is what states have been in charge of. List in the middle is where both are in charge. Next slide. And so basically from the founding, at the inception of the Constitution, the ratification of the Constitution, we had what we refer to as dual federalism, or as I like to call layer cake federalism. Not just me, a lot of people. Mr. Atheist, I wish I had a cupcake right now. Dual federalism. And this is the idea where the federal government, what's that?
Dave, you pop to the next slide real quick.
There you see a layer cake? You see a layer cake? Okay.
Yes.
This is where you have the federal government and the states being divided, not separated. They weren't like, we're over here and you're over there and you leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. They were just divided. So at any time a person's getting the whole piece of the cake, you're biting into federal and state, but you could clearly see whose role was whose. And that would be the slide I showed you previously. But then all of a sudden something happened when the Great Depression occurred and everyone was like, holy crap, we can't even find food anywhere. Next slide. And the New Deal happened under FDR. We got cooperative federalism. And this is where our cake turned into marble cake. And now it's really hard to divide out and see a distinction between where the federal's involved and where the state's involved. And this was kind of the whole point. So use these pictures as a way to understand why we are where we are today. We're in cooperative federalism. We're even technically in new federalism, but I'll get to that in a second. So go to the next slide, please. So how the federal government made the states get in line is we basically went from the carrot to the stick and then to this thing called a carrot, because we're kind of in between. And that was, we started with the carrot under the New Deal. So we said, hey, to get cooperative federalism going, let's offer grants and aid. There can be formula grants, there can be project grants. And then when the states were still resisting that change, they said, okay, I'm for the stick. Let's give you mandates. So this is where we get into things like you were talking about, Mr. Atheist, where the federal government gets involved with EPA regulations and says your cars need to have a minimum emissions standard, things like that. Sometimes they're funded to keep good relations with the states, where the federal government provides the money to allow them to get compliance. And other times they're unfunded. And it's like, you're going to pay for it yourself. This would be the Trump mentality with Mexico paying for the wall. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, is my point. But this is how we do it. But as of the 80s, we got into regulated federalism, and more recently under George W. Bush, new federalism. And this is where we started doing things with block grants and devolution. And this is basically doing a compromise system where we're able to we're basically trading, like, hey, states, if you comply here, we'll give you a little bit of power here. Or states, if you comply here, we're going to give you money for this other thing we know you have going on that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And so it's gotten so muddy and so murky that you just got to accept the fact that you're pretty free in America compared to other countries. And we are under our freedom. We have a murky, muddy federal and state government. And yep, you're underneath it. All right. Next slide should bring me back to Mr. Atheist.
I don't have a cupcake this time, but I do have a nice
soccer.
layered oatmeal pie.
That looks good.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I'm getting those.
I gotta
sweets.
stop eating on screen. God, I love sugar.
So if the fans out there are still tolerating me and I haven't left, everybody's left.
Oh, we stopped paying attention to the live feed a long time ago. We're actually engrossed in what you're saying.
Okay.
Sorry, live feed.
So
however,
it could just be the four of us.
Yeah,
however,
I think it is.
Caitlin has expressed her rage that you can't see her saying hello and wished me to say hello on her behalf to you.
Yeah, she's awesome. I promised her I would not blush anymore. So hi, Caitlin. She's definitely one of my favorites.
Just put it up here.
I've already got. I'm gonna try and make you blush now so hard.
Damn it. Anyways, okay. I gotta stay on focus.
Yeah.
You're gonna get me to derail. I just want to
It's so
quickly just talk
distracting,
about.
Jimmy.
I just want to quickly discuss citizenship because this is something that some people, sovereign citizens, they misunderstand all the time. So, Bull, if you could go to the citizenship slide. So just discuss how our citizenship in America has actually changed over time from the construction to the reconstruction. That by reconstruction, for those who don't know, would be post-Civil War. How did we get the Union back again to its former glory, if you will? So that's because when the country was first founded as a federacy, citizens were only defined by the states. Now, believe it or not, this was a problem to have just state citizens. Why? Because the initial citizens that existed were, lucky me, white privilege, white males only. If your spouse wasn't a citizen, if you had a white female spouse, and I'm speaking to sex, not gender. Well, I guess I could speak to gender. I don't know. I fucked that up. Never mind.
Don't do it. It's a trap.
I'm not gonna do it. It's a bad. I just completely killed myself here.
Words on my part.
Yeah.
Really bad idea.
No, let me stay on topic. All right, so I wish people for gender equality all day long. All right, so anyway, so citizens were defined just by the states to be white males. Like they're the only ones who know what they're talking about. And the federal jurisdiction was only that of enforcement of interstate issues. That's the only thing they could do. Article 1, Section 2 gave Congress the power to make sure that states had the privileges and immunities clause. So this is the idea that all the several states will be afforded the privileges and immunities. Citizens of a state will be afforded the privileges and immunities of the several states. And what that meant was, just because you move and you go down to, if you're from New York and you go down to Pennsylvania, doesn't mean that Pennsylvania can now go, here comes the New Yorker trying to change their citizenship. Screw that. They're not allowed to vote because they weren't born and naturalized here in Pennsylvania. That whole nonsense. So when we started to realize that the federal government said, hey, we're giving all these states power and they're acting like little children and not sharing their toys, we might need to step in. And then it became, holy crap, they are not letting go of this idea that people don't need to be owned and that blacks are equal with whites, male or female. Civil War breaks out. Civil War is won by the actual Union, because you got to remember when they seceded and they became back to the Confederacy. Look how well that did for them. The Union, obviously had their shit together. They come back in, win the Civil War, and the federal government said, enough's enough. We need an amendment that's going to clarify that we never intended states to just have this all-encompassing power to abuse individual citizens. There's an injury that's occurring here. It's no longer hypothetical. It's time to step in. And so who's your daddy is basically what happened here. And they created the 14th Amendment, which for the first time made hybrid citizens. This was, you became a citizen of your state and a United States citizen, meaning created this thing in the 14th Amendment known as the Privileges or Immunities Clause. Notice how it's different. So when somebody says privileges and immunities, they're talking about what was held to the federal government only against the states to ensure that the states what was held against the states enforced by the federal government. When they say privileges or immunities, this is dealing with making sure states do give their citizens whatever the federal government says they ought to have. So this is how we tried our best to enforce abolishment. Excuse me. So next slide should be a kid in the corner in timeout, pouting. For the first time, the federal government formalized the distinction of civil rights and civil liberties. This was a thing. Government has a compelling interest, right? As technology is advancing, as society advances, government has a more compelling interest to get involved. Well, it's the same thing. As society advances and technology advances, definitions need to be refined and sharpened. Terms need to be created. So this is the power of the federal government. They came in and said, okay, time for us to clarify. It's no longer just, we can't just use this general term rights, although they still do. We need to clarify that there's rights and there's liberties. And liberty no longer means what it used to mean, kind of a thing. When you think about the Declaration of Independence, when they say people are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are, we'll list 3, but there's more: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That liberty meant something that totally different than we think of liberty today because of these this reconstruction of America. So civil liberties are limitations placed on the government so that they can't interfere with your personal freedom. And civil rights are curbs on the power of majorities to make decisions that would benefit some at the expense of others. So anytime there's a minority group, the government goes, this isn't right. We got the majority just completely diminishing these people. It's time to step in and protect them. So when somebody says, I have a right to say whatever I want to say, that's not true. You're not part of a protected class. You have a liberty to say whatever you want to say. Now, people might say you're splitting hairs here, Jamie, but it's important if you want to manage your expectations, if you were ever to have to go to court. Alex Jones. So civil rights are, again, this would be things like Plessy versus Ferguson, one of the first cases to come out to invoke equal protection. All this is found in the 14th Amendment: the privileges or immunities clause, the due process clause, the equal protection clauses. Everything we've been talking about so far in these last 2 slides all falls under this idea of civil rights or civil liberties. That's how it is today. So Plessy versus Ferguson was the whole separate but equal thing. Horrible decision, but it was the idea of, for the first time, the federal government said, hey, if you're going to segregate, you need to make sure that it's equal. Okay. We need to maintain equality. And then, back during the Martin Luther King influence, that's my man. He comes in and the Supreme Court comes in and says, no more. Brown versus Board of Education. It's time to knock this nonsense off. It's time to grow up. It's time to do this right. All right, here we go. A couple more slides here. So slide with books, spool. Liberties are a system of rights based on moral principles so deeply embedded in the traditions and feelings of our people as to be deemed fundamental to a civilized society as conceived by our whole history. Due process is that which comports with the deepest notions of what is fair and right and just. This is one of my favorite justices, Justice Marshall. This is the idea that due process is a way, again, you have an inherently confusing system of freedom. We need to organize it. How do we do that? With procedure, with the way for the courts to make sure that things are being done right. References to liberty and founding documents, this is what I was talking about earlier, dealt primarily with incarceration. They got that from the Magna Carta, and it evolved over time into economic freedoms by the time we got to the Fifth Amendment, to later becoming direct civil liberty when we got to the 14th Amendment. So in Alligator versus Louisiana had to deal with the right to contract kind of a situation, economic liberty, it had to do with finding employment and bettering yourself and that kind of thing. All right, so a blue slide now next to talk about substantive liberties are limits on what the government can do, and procedural liberties are limits on what the government can act. I remember the first time I looked up due process in Wikipedia, probably 5 years ago, and it had in there substantive rights and procedural rights. And I was like, that's not correct. It's substantive due process and procedural due process, which gets us to the place of substantive liberties and procedural liberties. This is why all this exists. Barron versus Baltimore, 1833, said that the confusingly titled Bill of Rights were only limitations on the federal government. The states can do whatever the hell they want. So you like your Fifth Amendment? You like your Fourth Amendment? Too bad. If whatever state you're from says they're going to jump all over that, they can. This was just to keep the federal government out. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's what they ruled. It wasn't until 1897 when the Supreme Court held an allegation that the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to put appropriate republic controls on the states. This is a power for Congress against the states. It's the federal government's responsibility to ensure a Republican form of government in the several states of the Union, albeit at a much slower pace than all at once. So what that means is they can't just come in overnight and go, that's it, screw you state governments, you're all done. But they can do it slowly and invoke that change and allow adaptation to take place. Became known as selective incorporation. Next slide. This is a list quickly of all of the amendments to our Bill of Rights. I'm just going to start calling a Bill of Liberties. That'll be controversial. All the times that they've been incorporated. Most of these didn't hit until 1920. Can you imagine going through life from 1833 until 1920, generations, without a state a protection against state governments infringing on this freedom of speech? I mean, can you imagine a world like that? But eventually happened in Gitlau versus New York in 1925. So again, I don't want to spend all day long. I thought I would have more time than this. I should have rehearsed better. But this is how a selective incorporation happens. Next slide. What do you think, Mr. Atheist?
Sorry, I was muted. Well, you know that I'm trying to remember what my question was because I had a good one and then I lost it. Fuck me. And now you're
that's a statement, not a question. Actually, it's an offer, maybe. I don't know.
Well,
proposition
to anyone, Kyle, Jammy, Billy Connolly, any of you.
Demand.
Maybe? I was talking about, maybe this will help refresh your memory. I was talking about citizenship, and I had mentioned that some people take it to the extreme and they believe that they're what's sovereign because it says consent of the governed, that they are the rights of the government are given up by the people to form that government. And so therefore, since they're the ones who gave up something, therefore they're the ones who have everything that's required. And it's just not appropriate. Again, social contract, you're expected to give it up for the benefit of the greater good. So, a lot of times, a lot of sovereign citizens have an issue with this idea that the federal government can come in at any time and go, who's your daddy? Right. So,
yeah, I definitely had some who's my daddy questions, but I know the answer. Daddy. Has this worked for anybody though? The sovereign citizenship, does it ever work for anything?
No. I can tell you why. Bull, can you give me the next slide? Before I do, though, warning to all libertarians and sovereign citizens out there. Okay, the following phrases will cause complete destruction of your contentions. Next slide. Those phrases are the supremacy clause, the elastic clause, and the commerce clause. So, Mr. Atheist, what these clauses do, the supremacy clause basically says, hey, whenever there's a contradiction between the state and federal government, guess who wins? We do. They trump. No pun intended. They trump state power. State say when there's a conflict. The elastic clause said that Congress has the ability to make all laws necessary and proper to invoke, to keep the execution of the union in order. All laws necessary and proper. And then the commerce clause, anytime one state's dealing with another state in any manner, shape, or form, whether that commerce be actual transactions or it could be something as simple as communication, i.e. the Federal Communications Commission. It also says foreign states and with, the Native Americans. But the idea here is that it's primarily focused with interstate commerce. These three clauses give the federal government the ability to go in and say, hey, sovereign citizen, you don't have the power like you think you do. So again, you want to live in a free nation, you can call me a sheep, you can say I'm a bootlicker, you can insult me all you want. That's based on principle alone. For your insecurity showing. I'm totally fine having the freedoms that I have, and I'm open for discourse, I'm open for disagreement. Next slide, please. But if at any time it becomes a thing where who's right, who's wrong, I'm going to be staying in the country. I'm not going to be getting kicked out. I'll be all right.
I thought you were going to say that one of the phrases that causes complete destruction of their argument would be, am I being detained?
No. That just causes tasing.
And that's one of the unfortunate things. We've talked about this a little bit before. This is one of the unfortunate things that while I love watching these videos of sovereign citizens leading up to their tasing, they have ruined certain things. You should, as a citizen, know the phrase is, am I being detained? I don't consent to searches. But now if you say them because of this popularizing of this, what is essentially a meme, you're instantly going to flag to an officer, or they're at least going to start, all right, is this going to be one of those fucking things?
Yeah.
And they're going to pigeonhole you as a sovereign citizen.
At the start of this conversation.
Yeah.
No, at the start of this conversation, that's what I said was, I go, our government's not doing a good enough job. I mean, you got to get the training out there. And again, I'm all for, like you said it perfectly, I'm all for, not that my personal opinion should matter much, but I'm all for, just so everybody's clear, somebody protecting themselves from self-incrimination and for getting, I always joke, whenever I give these liberty lectures, I always joke with people and say, you've heard possession is 9/10 of the law, right? Well, I say confession is 9/10 of the law because don't do a cop's job for them. But at the same time, there's a proper tact and a proper, yes, you could just walk in there. I give you an example. There's somebody I know of, a friend of mine who's a lawyer was dealing with a matrimonial family law case not too long ago. And the guy went in and said, these are my children. The court doesn't have a right to put them on stand, blah, 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 and went on that whole idea of like, I'm the one in power here. You answer to me. Well, he didn't know about a thing called Lincoln hearings. And that's where a judge is allowed to just bring the children alone with a stenographer into his personal chambers, close the door, and talk to the children as long as the judge would like to. And everything gets recorded. The children say they can give the kids toys. And that's because psychologists and part of the APA convinced the government, the courts, that this should be something that's allowed, because children, it's intimidating to let kids get on the stand. How can their rights be fully invoked? So this happened. Guy watches his kids, goes into the judge's chamber, starts stewing, gets on these YouTube videos and starts putting things like, here's the judge. It's my citizen power to kill him because he's taking away my children. It's not a government's right to do that, and blah, blah. Guy's now in prison or jail. He's in jail waiting prison. Yeah, because he's got this self-powered mentality that, like, and this comes from confirmation bias, and it comes from illegitimate sources of information.
YouTube videos.
Yeah. What I was going to touch on very quickly is the 14th Amendment. One of the things sovereign citizens get wrong all the time is they believe that when it says all citizens born or naturalized in the United States are both the citizens of the state they're born, citizens of the, let me start over. All citizens born or naturalized in the United States, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are both a citizen of the United States and of the state where they reside. They got somehow a plain language interpretation that says that means I'm a citizen of my state, i.e. a free man, and also a citizen of the United States, i.e. a corporation. And therefore I have a capital first letter, lowercase the rest, person that's completely in power above all forms of government. And then I also have this corporation that exists over there where that's where all my bills go, and that's who owes taxes and that nonsense. And so they go to these
argument.
Yeah, they go to these deep they do all this work. I always, anytime I come across a sovereign citizen or a libertarian that does this, I always say it's primarily sovereign citizens, not necessarily libertarians. I shouldn't make that distinct grouping there. But sovereign citizens, I'll say, listen, you just spent months of your life filling out forms and paperwork and sending it in. Wouldn't it have been easier to spend 5 minutes on your taxes and then go and get a college education?
You would think, right?
Come on, man. Yeah.
Let me ask you some questions. I've been waiting, and I really do want to hear your answers. I'm running out of time. Okay, so first question, because we were just talking about it, the whole am I being detained? Is it or is it not true? To be detained, they do need to suspect you of a crime. They can't just detain you for the purpose of detaining you for some arbitrary reason. They need to articulate to you the reason why they're actually detaining you. Is that true or false?
It's, by the way you defined it, it's false. So a little bit more clarification there. If a police officer is in the middle of an investigation, whether you have privileged knowledge, you're privy to that knowledge or not, if they're conducting an investigation and you walk away from them while they're conducting investigation, they will apprehend you. They will detain you for the purposes of finishing the investigation. If they are just having a consensual conversation. Maybe they're just looking for possible eyewitness testimony, or they just walk up and want to just strike a conversation with you, and you walk away from them. They don't have any right to touch you at all, or liberty, I should say. So when the confusion here is when the question's not asked and the assertion's made, I can walk away from a police officer at any time until they clarify. The cop may or may not have had a chance. So where the education comes in is in two places. One, the police officer should be educated to inform the person they're talking to that they're under investigation. I mean, do we need to go back to Miranda versus Arizona, for crying out loud? And two, the person needs to be educated to ask if they're being detained. And in that sense, it's completely appropriate to do that. How I ask the question is a little different. I don't pull out the business card and just hand it and remain silent. I have a little tact. I say, officer, just so I'm clear, are you performing an investigation? And if the officer goes, no, I'm just talking to you. Okay. At this particular time, I'm late to something. I'd love to have a conversation with you, but I'm gonna have to say I can't right now. Wish you the best. I'll see you later. Bye.
Okay, so to clarify the question a little bit more, though, if they're conducting an investigation that is external to the person, like for example, they match the description, something like that, I can see something along those lines. But do they still have to tell them they are conducting an investigation that's not specifically about why they stopped the person? I mean, let's say they didn't see them committing a crime, right? Because a lot of times they say, have I done anything wrong? And suspicion, as they say, isn't necessarily a crime, right? I mean, you can't charge somebody of suspicion of committing something. But if they ask the person, am I being detained under a suspicion that I have committed a crime? And the officer says, no, like you said, I'm just talking to you. At that point, you are free to leave, are you not?
Yes. Yeah. At that point. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. What I was clarifying was the idea that you haven't been told. So therefore it's clear to assume. And what I'm saying is, unfortunately, that's not how it works.
Just because you haven't been told doesn't mean you can take off, right?
Right. Yeah.
I didn't mean to apply that at all. Right.
Yeah. Now again, detainment. Again, it's a gray area. Detainment based on suspicion alone is possible. It's upheld numerous times. You don't. A lot of people see. This is the thing. This is the biggest problem. Is our court system, like it or not, was not designed to be fair in the sense of every single individual person is going to get the best possible trial. It was designed to be efficient. So a lot of times court cases are dropped to remove them from the docket for lots of political reasons. Sometimes it's the judge just needs to show that he's not a hard ass, or she's a hard ass, it doesn't matter, and wants to show some dismissal so that it looks good for the next election coming up. I mean, these kinds so they're looking for those key cases. The sovereign citizen irresponsibly goes, my case was dismissed, so therefore I was in the right. Sometimes they just let you go because you're a fucking headache.
Probably, right?
You know what I'm saying? So that's the confusion, but it's presented as I had all the power. No, you didn't. So again, when you see a person who a cop goes, hey buddy, real quick, and maybe all they want to say is that your car because the tire's flat? The cop goes, hey buddy, real quick, and the guy takes off running because he watched too many YouTube
don't
videos.
do that, right?
And the cop chases him down and puts him in handcuffs. Maybe doesn't arrest him, but detains him. And the guy goes, you don't have a right to do this. They absolutely do, because at that particular time, under suspicion, they go, need to conduct an investigation now.
My second question was is a little bit basic, but as you said before, early on in the conversation, you had talked about an oath to the Constitution, to uphold the Constitution, which I've had to do, right? As somebody in the military, you do that. That's one of the first things you do when you swear in. You swear to uphold the Constitution. By doing that, as you said, you also are making an oath that you are going to uphold the things that your superiors tell you, right? So if you have a chain of command in the military, if somebody's an officer, you are saying that you are going to submit to their orders, right? If they're lawful orders. Now, there's sometimes you can contest them. You better know what you're doing, but there are sometimes you can contest unlawful orders. But a bad order is different from an unlawful order. So if they give you a bad order, you still have to do it, right? You can bitch about it later. You still got to do it, right? I've only in 6 years, I literally one time I actually said I'm not going to obey that order, but I knew what I was doing, and I actually had to go talk to the chief engineer and explain. I was relieved of duty, of course. But I explained to him the conditions. It had to do with a lot of the technical stuff of the reactor plant. But the chief engineer said, you were right. But nothing happened, so I got nothing. But I knew that was not something that I should be ordered to do, because it was putting the reactor in an unstable state. But anyways, so based upon that, when you are at, like, for example, this recently, there was a bunch of flat earthers that were on a pier, and the pier had a local ordinance that there was to be no commercial filming on the pier itself. Now, the commercial ordinance literally just dealt with people coming in from a movie studio wanting to film a movie. That's what it was mostly to try to the intent of the statute. Now,
Commercial.
the police, it was in New Jersey. So the police at the time, do they have an obligation to uphold an ordinance which does not supersede federal law that you can take a picture from anywhere public, right? Do they have a right? Do they have a obligation to uphold that statute, even though, again, the ordinance was for commercial filming, not people just with regular cameras? That was not the intent of it.
Right.
How would you see something along those lines?
So this is the problem. This is the problem when you have a system of civilization that's made up by fallible human beings, right? What most likely is going on there, and again, I don't want to speculate, but I'm saying it for the purpose of education. What's most likely going on there is you have an officer who's following an order from a superior, right? Like you alluded to earlier with your military career. So there's an order being given, and the person's going, this is my day-to-day job. This is what I need to get done. And that individual person doesn't have all the education, just like the flat earthers might not have all the education on the globe earth. So there's this idea that there's a conflict there. So the key is, again, it's not about the tree, it's about the forest. You allow the minor, I heard that. You allow the minor infraction, if you will, that temporary inconvenience to occur, and allow the process to take place as part of your agreement to be part of the forest. And this is also why the government has indemnification. Citizens have incorporation for their powers. Government have indemnification. They know that there's going to be mistakes made, and as long as the officer's in good faith, they're going to stand by and protect that officer. So
that's what happened,
that situation,
Jamie. In that case, on the pier, he released a subsequent video, and he was told that by his sergeant. And what it was the guy that was recording on the pier, he was doing like a YouTube channel. His name's Zoom's Truth, I believe. And they came and approached him and told him he couldn't do that. But the guy made a point that everybody around him was taking video of him getting this ticket for recording. So the police weren't saying a thing to anybody else around him, just him. And he was sitting there pointing out, like, if you're going to get me for filming, why aren't you getting them for filming or them for filming? And in that case, it looked bad.
This is the subject matter part of it. So, excuse me, you were set up with signs and you were trying to there was an act of commerce taking place, though. Let me communicate with everybody and influence them and call their attention. And then also, is your YouTube channel monetized? Because if I was the prosecution, I would push that point all day long. You were there for commercial.
That's not what they got it for. They were getting for filming in public. There wasn't anything with commerce, though.
Right. So a lot of times, and I admit it happens all the time, where a sergeant or a superior officer will go, you know what, I can't find the law right now, but we know, it's one of those things where we see what's happening. Let's take care of it. They probably had some harassment calls, complaints. Excuse me. They had complaints being made, and it was like, this is becoming a nuisance. Get this guy the heck out of here. What can we use? And they didn't have a lot to go on. I understand that. The person's response was to say, "Oh, these other people are filming, and what about this and what about that?" It's not the same thing. You're up there making a spectacle of yourself. Everybody else is just recording what's going on in the public. You recording yourself for documentation purposes is a little different. And that's where you get into that. Is he trying to thwart the idea that he's press? Those kinds of things. So again, it's a messed up system in the way that it's not perfect, defined as no errors, no flaws, but we have to give up a little bit and allow that flexibility for temporary. Who's in the right? Yeah,
it sounds like they figured out a way to both be wrong.
Yeah. What I'm saying is all the guy had to do was go. All the guy had to do was go, no problem, I'll turn off my camera, and then fight it later. That's all you have to do.
But why does he have to do that? If he's able to legally film in public, why does he have to turn off his camera? Just because of a city ordinance that has nothing to do with individual filming.
Well,
this is where the libertarian side in you, Steve, is coming out, where you don't want to be a sheep or you don't want to be a sucker. Right. Okay. Well, I'm saying tough titties. I appreciate the discourse, but the reality is it's not the avenue. You don't fucking argue with a cop. Like the avenue is no problem. I'll do it now. And in the back of your head, you go, I've got what's going on. I understand.
So how would
While
you
they
fight that
cited him-
afterwards?
Subsequently, he burnt his ticket. That ticket that he got. So this is a follow up. He burnt the ticket that they gave him on YouTube, and so he then got promptly a summons from a judge demanding that he appear in court in front of him to discuss this. So
I don't think you could
not
burn
very
a
bright
ticket,
move.
can you?
Yeah. Here's what I'm saying is
Not
I
recommended.
do the same thing. I do the same thing that guy did. The difference is I just willfully take the ticket, shut my mouth, shut the camera down, and deal with it later. And he doesn't. And again, we come back to the same point. Then I look at that person and say, what tangible freedoms did you get over me except for making an ass of yourself?
Okay, what
So-
would be the remedy though? What would be if he would have shut his camera off? What would have been his remedy after that?
Well, again, though, if they said turn off your camera, you're not going to be recording here, and then we won't issue a ticket. The remedy is he didn't get a ticket for that day. But if he said, okay, I want to be able to record, then go and you go to a local public hearing and you say, I want clarification from the board that what I'm doing is not under the definition of commerce as you've defined in that law. Can I get that backed? Yeah, you fight the ordinance, absolutely.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
if change needs to be made, change needs to be made. I'm not saying don't change anything. I'm saying a lot of times people sense it as tyranny because it's the curse of freedom. I mean, like I said, willfully choose self-control and bonds, and you will be free. If you go for absolute freedom to say that you have a gain on some other person, you're going to be put in bonds. And this is what happens.
I agree with that. And by the way, I think it's kind of ironic that they don't really follow up and challenge the ordinances and stuff like that. I don't really see any videos of them doing that, and they should. I think they totally should. This
Who
was
was this
Truth.
again?
Was it Truth? Two Spot? Spot Truth? Zoom Truth.
Zoom Truth.
It said they're a flat earther.
They're flat earther group.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my impression of flat earthers and also lots of sovereign citizens is in the moment, they think themselves so important that they think this thing they're beginning is going to end in the Supreme Court, and they're just going to expose all of the injustice, and they're going to get the $10 million GoFundMe. Go fund yourself,
Let me
you
say
fucking
something.
bitch.
Jimmy.
What would you do?
The Batusai on YouTube. He is a First Amendment auditor, and I will say that this happened to him. It was Turner versus Driver in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in Louisiana. He was detained for a lengthy amount of time, and it just went to the Supreme Court about 8 months ago, and the Supreme Court there sided with him in Texas, and that whatever that circuit is, that they can't be detained for merely photography. Like that can't be so sometimes they as crazy as they do enact.
There is a
I can see
process to
them.
go through. I was more talking about those people who, when they're in front of the cops, and this is when the cameras come out, they're shouting things like, I wasn't traveling, or I wasn't driving, I was traveling. They were driving a vehicle.
Jamie, don't you think there are some times where maybe I hate to use the word civil disobedience because it's not really civil disobedience, but if a cop tells you something that you have a freedom for, right, and whatever liberty you have, but something that you know that you're not breaking any laws, you have a liberty to do whatever it is, and they say that you don't have that, right? I mean, don't you think that some people probably will, you know what, officer, you are overstepping your bounds. You cannot tell me something like that because I have these fundamental liberties. That is something given to me. You cannot take away. You can't order somebody away to do something against the liberties. Would you agree with that or disagree?
I don't see the point. So here's what I'm saying. Okay, if you know you're right, if right in the sense of correct, if you know that that's what's going on, and the officer is clearly in the wrong, you can exercise that liberty to shut your mouth. So just allow things to take their course and know in the back of your head, like I said, it's the idea of parents give authority to the teenagers to watch the house. The little one starts fighting and everything. Even if the little one is right, and I know it sounds stupid because I'm giving the brains of a 4-year-old here, but even if the little one is right, the thing is when the parents come home, all will be fixed and corrected. Sometimes it takes a lot of fighting and going through the system, but this is what happens when you start on social contract. You give citizens a corporation of powers, and you have government indemnification. I mean, this is the point. What I was going to say also that might help clarify a lot of this is nothing is more annoying than when you get somebody walk into a publicly funded building that's there, like a Department of Motor Vehicles or Department of Public Safety or something like that, and they walk in and they demand that the person working there as an employee of the government make them coffee or,
Oh, God.
kiss their butt in that kind of way. But this is what it comes down to. Not only you can keep trickling down this delegation of authority, right? Like you said, there's not these institutions, these agencies, commissions, departments, these things that are created under authority by the Constitution through extension are also given the power to regulate themselves as any private business would. So they have their own policies and procedures. They have their own HR departments. And so they give their employees job descriptions. So when you sit there and you're like, hey, could you give me some water? Could you do this? Could you do that? When people are there who do that, it's completely appropriate for that government employee to look at that person and say, not my job description. Because the consensus, the 300 million are going, we're not giving that person money for a salary to kiss your butt and get you water. Get it yourself. So this is the frustration. This is where it's gone. It's turned into this whole extreme measure. And again, I think it's psychological. Now, Shannon's not in here with me, but if she would, I would ask her what she thinks. But I think it's psychological. I think it comes down to a need to feel special, a need to feel powerful in some way. I think it's an insecurity. I don't have that. I'm completely comfortable in the freedoms that I have. I disagree many times with the government. I think there's lots of times when the government's wrong, and I'm happy to see when the government corrects themselves. But I also think that I'm not going to get it any freer than it is, and my expectations managed a little bit better. I don't see it as I have a right to argue with a cop on the road because I know I'm right. And I'm educated quite heavily in this stuff, and I would never argue with a police officer on the side of the street. I just smile and hope they get a big paycheck.
Would you ever request so for example, years ago, I used to run a company that we did like festivals and concerts and events and such. And sometimes you'd get some person there who's just blatantly lying about the fire code and showing off their dick. And they're like 26 years old, fresh out of the academy. Would you at least ever request a supervisor when they're trying to fuck with your livelihood?
Oh, yeah. You're talking about... I apologize. I got a little distracted. Somebody just sent me something that I apologize, Mr. Atheist.
Oh, you got my dick pic? Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. It was a little bit urgent, so I got a little distracted.
All my dick pics are urgent.
Say what you said again. I'm so sorry, man.
I used to do a concerts and events company. I had a concerts and events company, and we'd throw festivals and concerts and shit. Every now and then you'd get a cop who would show up and just it's kind of swinging their dick around. They're like, it was always that like fresh faced out of the academy, I might be older than kind of guy, showing up to, and in those situations, we would say, you're wrong here, but can we get a supervisor here to clarify? Because in that scenario, they're actually fucking with the livelihood. Like you can't, if you've booked an artist, you can't reschedule the festival for another day. Because these people are fucking up your shit.
And I'm assuming that you, in that situation, you probably got the necessary permits, or you at least involved the local board some way, shape, or form, right? So I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, okay, so I mean, they should, so absolutely in those cases, ask for a supervisor. What I don't like to see happen is everybody just asking for a supervisor. It immediately gives the impression that you're insulting the officer. And if I was that officer, I would look at it like, okay, so now I got to prove myself, which is what you're trying to defeat, right? You're trying to
challenging
you're by challenging them. They feel like they got to prove themselves. You're trying to get out of that human psychology back and forth and escalation. So again, it is in certain situations definitely appropriate to ask for a supervisor, especially if you feel the person's a rookie. I would argue, is it a peace officer that's just doing security work at the night, at the time? Because normally they have field training officers when they're indeed rookies. There's somebody always with them anyways, but
sometimes it works though. I mean, like they had drones they were flying, and obviously we know that drone law is pretty lax right now. There's really not a lot of laws when it comes to drones, what you can and cannot do. But
the hard part with drones too, and this is actually a part of my everyday job, and we get this shit a lot, is city councils and shit are now passing laws and stuff on them because there's no other you get people out there. What's that?
Why do they?
I have no idea.
To do that?
I have no idea. All I know is I've gotten shut down, and it's like, okay, well, I have this commercial license to do this, and they're like, oh, okay, but this regulation now. So everybody who can is trying to pass a law, except for the people who should be passing a law.
Yeah, but I've actually seen them actually challenge somebody that says they can't use the drone, and they have said, can you please get a supervisor? And the supervisor comes out and says, yeah, you're fine. So I mean, I don't think there's always not a time to ask for a supervisor if you really are really that sure of something, because from experience that drone laws are just all over the place right now.
We had a cop try to shut us down in a theater because he came in and eyeballed it and thought that there were too many people, but we use counters and everything to make sure we know how many people can be in each section. And so he goes through and ends up doing a manual count, but then comes up with some bullshit about, but these chairs that you put over there, those modify your count, which actually it's not true,
count as people.
This actual theater, the actual number of people that were allowed to be in there was designated by when it was fully shared. We lifted the chairs out for standing room. It was actually in theory you could have more if that was a real law. And so that was a time where we were like, I think you made that up, but if you have a supervisor who wants to come clarify that for me, that's fine. And it was something like every chair reduces your approved count by 3 or something. It was like,
sounds stressful.
You made that shit up.
Mr. Atheist, you talked earlier about right to travel. I was going to say, weren't you telling me about a court case you heard about that involved that?
Yeah. Oh man, there was.
You want me to tell?
Okay. Yeah.
No.
Well, I actually remade this story. I was in trouble for public lewdness, but luckily I got out of it because I told the judge I wasn't riding Kyle on the beach. I was traveling Kyle on the beach.
How did it work? You never told me how that case came out.
I then got traveled a lot in prison.
I got let go. I got let go because of lack of evidence.
And because we were doing, you remember that bondage stuff you were talking about earlier?
Are you saying
voluntarily?
that, Kyle? Are you saying that could have been settled in a small claims court?
Yeah. Am I being detained?
Is that it?
That's good, Steve.
There's a I know that there's a safe word in here somewhere. There's got to be a safe word involved.
You were singing last night, Steve. You got another good singing.
That was a good one.
Joinder.
So I feel horrible. It's going this late. Let me push ahead, Bull. If you could skip ahead, including the transitions. If you could skip ahead, I think it's. Let me see here. So let's see. We're on this one.
Slide
so
39.
1, 2, 3 slides. Yeah. Can you go to 3 slides for me, please? Yeah. Oh crap. Oh Jesus. How did that get in here? That wasn't the one. Let's see here.
Where can I learn more about my rights as a sovereign citizen?
That's what I was going to tell you. So if you want more, there's a good book you can get on Amazon called Freedom by Adam Quinket. And I took the time to. Amazon offers a thing that says look inside. So I took the time to look inside. I'll give you a screenshot of what's inside the book.
I feel bad because I haven't yet. I really do feel bad that I haven't looked at it yet. Should I? I mean,
I'll show you what's inside of it. Just go ahead and click to the next slide.
Gosh.
All right, so this is what it is inside. It's just a bunch of YouTube videos on am I being detained or am I free to go?
Taser.
Also, if there's any family members of sovereign citizens out there, if you have small children or anything, if they're looking for books to help them get through the sovereign citizen mentality, next slide. I found some more books on Amazon. This is My Daddy's in Jail, The Night Dad Went to Jail. You can feel free to get those.
Damn, cold-blooded. Jammy dropping the mic on the finale here.
All right. We'll go to the next slide, which should be Mr. Atheist. And I feel like I did a horrible job of wrapping this up in a good way. We kind of went on tangents, which I knew would happen. I wasn't afraid of it happening, but I just felt like I couldn't really prepare for it well. But again,
the poor daddies are on jail now. You left on a very sad note. Daddy's in jail.
If people out there have any questions or anything like that they want to hit me up, individually, I'll help them as much as I can. Like I said, I'll give you the best free legal advice I can. I won't charge you the typical $250 an hour rate, but
thanks for not billing us, by the way.
Yeah.
Well,
when we first started, I felt like we already owed you. I was like, oh my God, we're in debt already.
We'll pay you in other ways.
And remember that.
Go ahead.
And remember that from henceforth, you don't have to call him Jammy anymore. He is now Law Daddy.
Law Daddy.
Law Daddy.
Law Daddy.
Tell me
Okay,
how it is.
Steve, you want to read any super chats real quick?
Yeah, a couple super chats.
Any
One, I
questions,
definitely
anybody?
got to read this one. We haven't got any questions yet, but hopefully they'll come through in a second. But I do want to read off this one from yesterday that I overlooked. My fault, mea culpa. So 0132-132-666. When
Always.
someone doesn't remember me, I only torture them for 5 minutes tops. I'm infinitely more forgiving than Yahweh. Hashtag Zero for God 2020. I think you torture people for more than 5 minutes, Zero.
I love Zero.
At least you torture them at least until they say the safe word. But I found out this, by the way, guys. Speak from personal experience. Don't use stop as a safe word. Not a good idea. On site, I'd rather change that whole experience.
We're not supposed to talk about that.
Yeah,
that
Any more
case is
super
still before the courts.
It confused Mr. Atheist to no end.
Jamie, here's your first question.
What's that?
Oh, you got another super chat? Okay.
Yeah, one more super chat. Thrift store Dan, $5. I'm at work right now, so I can't stick around. Just wanted to drop in to say hello. Well, thank you, thrift store. There you go.
Clever
Okay.
name.
Here's your first question, Jamie. It comes from Eric W. Am I being detained?
Goddamn right.
Yeah. Hopefully you're detaining yourself, and that will make you free, my friend. No, I'm just trying to.
Can I reply to questions? But as Psi 10, well, how would you know you were being detained? Were you trusting your cognitive faculties?
That officially.
How do you know that?
Yeah,
hashtag Law Daddy is trending now, Jamie. Hashtag Law Daddy is now trending.
Yeah.
Oh man, I thought Jimmy Jam was gonna go. All right, I appreciate the love.
$4.99 from KC. She says, "Hi, Jamie. Great show, guys." That's from Caitlin.
Oh,
thank you, Caitlin.
Caitlin's wonderful.
Yeah, I hope it came across. Everyone appreciates it. I know I threw out some jokes on there.
I had one dispenser the entire time.
Okay. Well, it doesn't matter because I know I'm right. But I do appreciate people sticking around for 2 hours, taking busy time out of their life. And like I said, to summarize it, just again, the point of this was to just manage expectations. You can go around from this day forward and refer to liberties as rights and rights as liberties, and that'll be fine. Except just know I'll be disappointed in you. And and if you again, the idea here is it's about being free. And, just knowing that it's not as tyrannical as sometimes it's presented, that while some people might fear that it's encroaching, there is still those avenues. There is still those processes in place. We have a good house with good walls, good roof, good foundation. But a lot of people come in and go, yeah, but the carpet sucks. The colors of the walls suck. This is the worst house ever. And it's like, those can be changed. We're still in that area where we can, relatively speaking, put fresh paint up, put new carpeting in, put new counters, new cabinetry. We can do that thing. No pun intended to Trump's cabinetry.
Our carpets are
so I hope I'm encouraging more than discouraging was my point. Okay.
We could make America great in the future instead of making America great again. I'm just saying.
My question has always been, at what point was America great? I just want to hear that definition.
It's a great line. With Jeff Daniels, that's how it opens up. That was a fantastic show, and that's how it opens up with somebody asking him that question.
I know how Fox News would answer it. They would ignore the existential nature of that question and the fact that you're talking about and they would just start listing off individual days as though that would refute the question. That's how Fox News approaches it.
But I can understand that
answer by saying bring Bill O'Reilly back. That's how they would answer.
But if he's saying there are, that America, when is America ever great? That can be demeaning to like the greatest generation, don't you think? In some ways.
No.
I disagree.
The greatest generation demeans themselves by having a label called the greatest generation.
Well, they didn't. I don't think they attached that label to themselves.
They set that self. They did. You ever met those guys?
I think they mean like there's always room for improvement. Like it's never gotten to a point where it's the pinnacle of what everybody believes that it can be, but the potential is there, and so you want to strive for that potential.
I think.
So I don't think it's a derogatory dig unless you turn it that way. I don't think it is, because it's just it's about America's potential.
America
always things we
does
can work
have the
on.
greatest-
There's always
it does have
points
the
that
greatest
that we
potential.
can work on.
Somebody requests you do a lipstick test again. Just
Okay, here we go.
Secondary validation.
I need like a glass. Anything on my hands? Anything?
Hey, just put it on
like
your collar. Kiss your collar. Kiss your collar.
Yeah.
I'm wearing lipstick, just not on my lips.
So
Yeah.
this is what's crazy is I
Yeah,
just recently.
Smitty said the greatest generation had internment camps, segregated forces, and casual sexism.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why when I was defining liberty earlier as incarceration, I was like, let's not talk about the Japanese can't even talk right now. Holy cow! You know what I'm talking about? The Japanese
Internment camps.
Thank you.
I'll do it
Holy
for you.
cow.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you. I did want to throw out a couple shout outs real quick.
Sure.
Hannah, Smitty. Oh, no. Puff. I didn't forget about you, dog. I got Christy, Sweet Heathen. Who are some Riley? Who else do I talk to on a regular basis in there? Esaliken, if that's how you pronounce your damn name. And
Yes.
if Clock's out there, Red Eye. Just wanted to say, obviously Caitlin, but I already got a chance to say hi to her. So love you
Shout
all.
out to Rappies and homegirls. Yeah,
I'll
shout
throw out some
to
love to Frustrated Atheist too. He's a good dude.
Okay, all right.
Jamie, do you have Twitter?
Twitter?
Twitter.
I don't, because as I explained to Shannon, all that's filled with is a bunch of yoga pant wearing thoughts, and I stay away as much as I possibly can. No, I
Twitter
can't
is by
do
definition a dumpster fire.
the social media thing is just I'm too damn busy. You know, it's like the rent is too damn high party. I'm too goddamn busy. It is like I just don't have the time to stay on top of it. And to be honest with you, it's like I call it fake book news. I can't stand when that rolls through and it's like, oh god, this is just leading people down the wrong path. But
we appreciate you, man, coming on and doing this. It was fantastic. You did great.
This is going to be more like than last night's episode, just to let you know. So
I think
you'll
hey,
like
part
the
2.
10. How do you like that?
No one will need an EpiPen to recover from tonight's episode like last night's episode. Fucking
yeah.
Right.
So
also, I was just going to say very quickly, Kyle, I probably won't go back and read the comments because I'm fully expecting it to be the typical rhetoric. But
no, it hasn't.
There's only one
It hasn't
dissenter.
been so bad. Yeah,
I mean, and that dissenter is a lawyer, and so we might get you guys together.
Allegedly,
I think he takes a very different position on things than you do.
I know reading his comments though, I think he plopped in halfway through and thinks you're at least a little bit on the side of the sovereign citizens. So I don't think this guy was actually listening. He was just kind of. I've liked him in everything else, and I've seen a bunch. I've seen him in a bunch of stuff, but I think he was kind of being a douche tonight and just doing a scoreboard kind of thing, as opposed to actually giving counterpoints. It was just, nope, that's wrong. LOL. No, this is so wrong. So
he makes one. He doesn't make one good point though. If I could point out, if he has argued in constitutional law in court, so if he would have said Bill of Liberties rather than Bill of Rights, they probably would have laughed at him, even though you're saying that's technically correct. Is that a time where you would just use the general accepted meaning or something to be pedantic?
I don't know. Did he disagree that they're actually liberties enumerated in the Bill of Rights?
And I think it's because he wasn't here in the beginning when you were talking, when you actually laid out the differences between what a right and what a liberty is. And you even acknowledge that for the most part in the courts, liberties are going to be called rights. That doesn't make them right.
Well, here's the thing. I'll say this, and maybe he'll like this, maybe he won't. I don't know. But I know a lot of attorneys that have nothing to do with constitutional law whatsoever formally that are, they sell houses, they do wills, family matters, but then somebody hires them to speak on some type of state constitutional, at a state court and speak on a constitutional matter. So when somebody says this person spoke constitutional, I got to take that at face value. I don't know what that means. But it happens many times. Second Amendment issues, especially. I get calls all the time because firearms instructors have to teach on the personal protection laws, and they hire just an attorney. And the guy gets in there, it's like, or it could be a woman, doesn't matter, but it's like, well, just, you can't do this and you can't do that. And there's no preparation. I've been doing this for 10 years. 6 years officially with the U.S. government in the sense of it's been volunteer work, but I've been involved. And, I've seen all aspects. So I haven't read the guy's chats. I don't want to speculate too much, but I'm just skeptical that this person's disagreeing with me on points that I'm actually wrong on.
I'll say my broadest.
Might be able to bring both of you on here and talk about them because I think that
my
might
broadest
be a good
interpretation in reading it was
come to it and you disagree.
I think he felt he should have been the one invited on to discuss all of this because he kept bringing up things along those lines. I don't know. I was reading the whole thing, and I even told him in the chat, "You're kind of being a douche right now."
Well, we can bring him on. I mean, he's been on before. He was on with the Black Heathens. I mean, but he's going to do his own live feed right now. So
yeah.
But it is kind of hard when you're just throwing things out there in live chat saying, "Oh, he's wrong,
right,"
and not giving reasons why he's wrong, right?
Right.
Just
trust my scoreboard because of my credentials.
Yeah, well, I was given. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is I was given 90 minutes to try to explain something that takes 8 years to learn. So,
yeah, and you did great.
Yeah, that was awesome.
We'll go over you guys and let people know where they can find more of you, and if they want to follow up, start with you, Jammy. Where can people contact you and all that if they want to hear more?
Yep, Facebook, Jammy Sizlo, and Instagram, Jammy Sizlo, and I refuse to use Twitter.
You're on Insta?
Yeah, I did brand new. Just started it. Maybe a month ago. I'm still trying to figure out how the thing works. I guess what I have to do is be half nude and play music in the background when I do a video. I'm going to become I guess a model.
That's the secret to awesomeness, man. It would anything you do, just be half nude and you will go far.
Or deep cleavage.
Mr. Atheist.
I'm Mr. Atheist. I have a YouTube channel called Mr. Atheist. Every Thursday, we answer the questions that atheists are asked over and over again. This month, we've been focusing a lot on Mormonism, where I come from. But tomorrow, we're probably actually going to break ranks a little bit and switch back to Catholicism because this shit's getting crazy. And as just a little point of fact, so you can go find me there. Also, I am one of the hookers in the Russian PP Donald Trump tape. So it does exist. I was there. That's it.
I thought you were the best group. I thought you were like the best group or something.
So was Ivanka.
The best what?
The best grip. They have the grip.
Oh, yeah. I was gripping something. Ivanka and I were hard on
that. Okay. That's a good note to end it on. Join us tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. We will have Nate Talks to You and the Feminist Next Door discussing feminism on ideology. And we will see you then.
At Hommies on Saturday.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. 7 p.m. Cool. We're gonna be tackling all the best videos, right?
Yeah. We've already got such a great list.
We're so professional. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Bye.
Non sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.